Remember when Barnes & Noble was the place to hang out? Grab a coffee, sink into those comfy chairs, and lose yourself in books for hours? Well, by 2018, they were on life support, laying off nearly 2,000 employees, firing their CEO amid scandal, and publishers were literally preparing for their funeral. But then something unexpected happened. A British bookseller flew in and did what everyone said was impossible. He's turning Barnes & Noble around, and the way he's doing it, it goes against everything we thought we knew about modern retail. This is the rise, fall, and shocking comeback of America's last bookstore giant. Barnes & Noble stands as America's sole remaining national bookstore chain, moving over 190 million physical books annually. Yet few would argue they possess the dominance they once commanded. Pinpointing their golden age proves tricky, depending on your metrics. If pure revenue matters most, then 2011 to 2012 marks their zenith, the only period they surpassed $7 billion in sales. Their arch-rival Borders had just collapsed into bankruptcy, sending former customers flooding into Barnes & Noble stores as the last national chain standing. But that's a shallow analysis. Dig deeper, and you'll find that despite impressive sales figures, the company was hemorrhaging money during those years and already shuttering locations. The reality? Online retailers, primarily Amazon, were tearing the industry apart. They'd already destroyed Borders, and Barnes & Noble was scrambling to survive. These problems have been festering since the 1990s, and this was the moment they finally exploded into crisis. The authentic peak likely occurred in the mid-2000s. That's when profits hit record highs, stock prices soared to historic levels, and they were still expanding, reaching 726 stores by 2008. However you measure it, the decline that followed was dramatic. By 2018, the situation looked dire. February brought the announcement of 1,800 layoffs as the company desperately cut costs. July saw their CEO terminated, initially without explanation. Those sexual harassment allegations later surfaced. By year's end, publishers grew anxious about a potential collapse, and rumors swirled about finding a buyer. A sale did materialize the next year. The new ownership implemented changes that appeared to have stabilized things, possibly igniting a turnaround. Let me back up, because there's a lot to unpack here. First, let's explore how Barnes & Noble built this empire. I see three distinct chapters. In 1917, William Barnes partnered with Gilbert Clifford Noble to run a New York City bookstore specializing in textbooks for local universities. Over time, it evolved into a wholesale operation, famous for its massive Fifth Avenue flagship location. What made that store special? Partly the streamlined system employees used to serve customers, partly being among the first retailers to pipe instrumental music through speakers, but mainly its sheer scale, expanded in the 1940s and eventually crowned the world's largest bookstore. Quick favor before we dive deeper. If you're enjoying this deep dive in a company's documentary, smash that like button and subscribe. The second chapter, let's call it the expansion revolution, was driven almost entirely by Leonard Riggio. In the early 1960s, he was an NYU engineering student working days at the campus bookstore to fund his night classes. By 1965, he'd saved $5,000 and opened his own college bookstore just around the corner from his former employer. It thrived. He plowed profits back in, launching 4 more locations. Then in 1971, he secured a $1.2 million bank loan to acquire Barnes & Noble. Here's the thing. Noble had departed decades before that flagship store even existed. The Barnes family ran things until John Barnes, the founder's grandson, died in the 1960s. The company changed hands shortly after, but the new owners struggled. They were willing to sell to Riggio at a fair price. Ironically, Riggio deserves more credit for this company's success than the men whose names grace the storefronts. Immediately after taking control, he converted his existing stores to the Barnes & Noble brand. He broadened their appeal beyond students by stocking general nonfiction beyond textbooks. He launched a huge nearby facility selling discounted books, opened additional Barnes & Noble locations, initially in neighboring states, and in 1974 aired some of the industry's earliest TV commercials, promoting their somewhat forced tagline, "Of course, of course." By the 1980s, growth came through acquiring mall bookstores. The biggest deal? Purchasing B. Dalton for roughly $300 million. You probably don't recognize that name. They vanished over a decade ago. But back then, Dalton dwarfed Barnes & Noble. This was the third largest bookstore chain buying the second largest. Dalton had double the sales and 20 times the locations, though considerably smaller stores. The third chapter, which continues today, is the superstore era. Massive retail outlets using economies of scale to deliver low prices and vast selection became the trend. By the 1990s, this became Barnes & Noble's strategy, not just offering thousands of titles, but creating a comfortable environment where customers could linger and browse. They added plush seating, extended operating hours, and partnered with Starbucks to install cafes inside stores. In 1993, they went public, raising capital to launch hundreds of new superstores while gradually closing outdated Dalton locations. Meanwhile, Borders pursued a nearly identical strategy, embracing the new concept while phasing out their Waldenbooks chain. Throughout the 1990s, these two juggernauts dominated the industry. It sparked controversy. They were killing independent bookstores. If you've watched the 1998 film, You've Got Mail, you know exactly what I'm referring to. That same year, they even faced an antitrust lawsuit. Hard to believe, right? The major concern then was that Borders and Barnes & Noble were monopolizing book sales. Shows how dramatically things have shifted. Interestingly, You've Got Mail also captures how technology and the internet were infiltrating everyday life. Online shopping and e-commerce transformed retail. We've covered this repeatedly on the channel. Embrace it or perish. I won't criticize Barnes & Noble too harshly here, because honestly, they handled it reasonably well. Certainly better than Borders. But competing against Amazon and Apple? That's brutal. Consider this. Amazon now threatens virtually every retailer everywhere. They launched selling books in 1995, making Barnes & Noble among the first major companies threatened by them. Barnes & Noble launched their website roughly 2 years later, sparking an immediate rivalry. Barnes & Noble sued Amazon for false advertising when they claimed to be the world's largest bookstore. Amazon sued Barnes & Noble for copying their one-click checkout. Both settled out of court. By the late 1990s, Amazon captured 75% of online book sales versus Barnes & Noble's mere 15%. Their online operations weren't profitable. Far more books sold in physical stores then, and their success stemmed from the in-store experience. So even though the internet represented the future, you can understand why they continued prioritizing physical retail rather than panicking about being the second largest online bookseller. A decade later, e-readers became the new threat. I remember constant buzz about these devices. Amazon launched the Kindle in 2007. Barnes & Noble countered with the Nook in 2009. Apple unveiled the iPad months later. Borders released the Kobo the following summer. By most accounts, the Nook was decent. The company invested heavily, perhaps excessively. Some shareholders complained the money should fund stores instead. It dominated their annual report. They even hired a new CEO, William Lynch, based on his e-commerce and technology background. You could theorize Barnes & Noble struggled attracting non-customers. You could argue they lack compelling apps compared to competitors. But ultimately, it circles back to competition. This was a bookstore battling Amazon and Apple in the technology arena. The Nook never gained traction and mostly wasted money. In 2012, Microsoft invested $300 million in the Nook division for a partnership to boost relevance. That partnership crumbled. Even Microsoft lost money. Plans emerged to spin off the Nook as a separate company alongside their education business. But they retained the Nook while spinning off only the education parts. Despite respectable efforts, the Nook has been disastrous for Barnes & Noble. You might disagree, but regarding digital and e-commerce, I'd argue Barnes & Noble performed as well as reasonably expected given the circumstances. But it's been challenging, and Amazon simply executed better. Let me highlight a British bookstore called Waterstones, the largest chain in the region. In 2011, they faced similar troubles when James Daunt took charge to engineer a turnaround. Having launched his own successful small chain around London, he successfully revived Waterstones. In 2018, Elliott Management acquired Waterstones. The following year, Elliott acquired Barnes & Noble and installed James Daunt as CEO. He implemented numerous changes, many already proven successful at Waterstones. He eliminated sales of non-book merchandise. He stopped accepting publisher payments for premium placement in front displays and windows, instead showcasing books employees believe customers actually want. Perhaps most significantly, he granted store managers more authority selecting inventory, reasoning they better understand local customer preferences than a distant central office. During the pandemic, when stores closed temporarily, they used the downtime to refresh appearances and redesign layouts. As a private company now, they don't publish financials, but they've disclosed rising sales and announced plans to open new locations. I doubt they've reached their former heights, but they're clearly reversing the decline. Whether this continues or where it leads remains uncertain, but it appears promising for Barnes & Noble's future. What's your take on Barnes & Noble? Have you visited recently? Is it still a great place to discover new books? Or do you prefer alternatives? Maybe you thought Borders was superior, or you support smaller independent shops. Or do you buy from Amazon? Personally, I lean toward audiobooks. There are so many options now. What should Barnes & Noble have done differently? Do you see potential for a genuine comeback? This is one of retail's biggest stories, so whatever thoughts you have about Barnes & Noble, drop them in the comments below.